March 9th, 2022. All Elite Wrestling Dynamite is broadcasting Chris Jericho standing in the middle of the ring, shaking hands with the Mad King from New York City, Eddie Kingston, after suffering a defeat at his hands at the Revolution pay-per-view just a few days earlier. They were interrupted by the trio of 2.0, Matt Menard, Angelo Parker, and Daniel Garcia. They threw Jericho to the side and started attacking Kingston. Jericho's Inner Circle stable members, who he had an established relationship with, Santana Ortiz, rushed the ring to even the odds. They handed Jericho a trusty baseball bat, asking him to fight back. But Jericho betrayed them, hitting them with the bat. Then 2.0 and Daniel Garcia joined in on the beatdown with Jericho. Soon after, another Inner Circle member, Jake Hager, joined them as well. And now we had a new group that didn't have former members. We had a new identity, and it was dubbed the Jericho Appreciation Society, with Jericho declaring, "This is the Jericho Appreciation Society, and that's entertainment." This Appreciation Society of one of the big names that helped establish AEW added even more members, with some day one people like Sammy Guevara, Tay Conti, and Anna Jay joining the group, making it bigger and stronger. At first, it felt like a little bit off because Jericho was already leading the Inner Circle group, which had Santana Ortiz, Jake Hager, and Sammy Guevara. Now, why do this new group? But in retrospect, the formation of the group made some sense. Everyone involved needed a new direction, and the group gave them a sense of purpose in the very deep roster of AEW. But sadly, the group didn't stick together for all that long. Only a bit more than a year after it started, and then they went their separate ways. So what went wrong for the Jericho Appreciation Society? Let's break it all down. This is Sportskeeda Wrestling. I'm Kevin Kelm. Let us know what you think of the Jericho Appreciation Society. Who are your favorites in AEW right now? Before the Jericho Appreciation Society, there was the Inner Circle, another Jericho-centric faction that saw him team with another former WWE superstar and Jake Hager, along with Santana Ortiz, an established tag team, and Sammy Guevara. The group was instrumental in the first few years of AEW and gave some memorable moments, including a huge main event where they took on the other faction led by MJF, The Pinnacle, in the main event of Double or Nothing 2021. By late 2021, though, the Inner Circle was losing their steam a bit, and the call was made to slowly but surely break them up. So AEW inserted someone who's truly a passionate, emotional performer, Eddie Kingston, who got the ear and the influence upon Santana Ortiz, speaking negatively about their leader, Chris Jericho, behind his back, prompting the two to question their place in the Inner Circle under Jericho's leadership. This led to a match between Jericho and Kingston at Revolution 2022. Jericho stated that if he lost the match, he would shake Eddie's hand in the middle of the ring. At the pay-per-view, Eddie defeated Chris, but instead of shaking his hand, Jericho walked out. What a sleazy move. But a few days later, it was discussed on Dynamite. Jericho shook his hand, but it was a trap, as 2.0 and Garcia had their own issues with Kingston, and Jericho came out for the attack and everything we described earlier, Santana Ortiz being betrayed, but instead of embracing the support, Jericho refused their assistance and formed a new group. It felt similar to the Inner Circle, with Matt Menard and Angelo Parker being the tag team that replaces Santana Ortiz, Daniel Garcia being the new protege. Sammy Guevara would have played that role before, but he was busy with the TNT Championship at the time, and it felt like this would, truly go its separate ways. Similar to the Inner Circle, but different. This group had 5 members, but soon the dynamic was about to change. The next week on Dynamite, Jericho appeared with his new allies by his side. He grabbed the mic and began boasting about himself, claiming AEW wouldn't exist without him, and he carried the company on his broad shoulders. He accused the fans of not giving him the recognition he deserved, and claimed the Inner Circle truly never appreciated him. Pointing to 2.0, Garcia, and Hager, Jericho declared that these men did appreciate him, forming the Jericho Appreciation Society. You get the name? The JAS wasn't very catchy of a name in the eyes of some, but it was doing the trick at the first part here, and many fans just weren't digging into the appeal. But the original name was even worse. On his Talk is Jericho podcast, he revealed that the name of it was going to be The Citadel. Quote, "I thought The Citadel was great. I said it to Tony, and there was no pop from it whatsoever." Tony Khan, AEW president, did not like that name and came up with Jericho Appreciation Society reportedly. The name worked at conveying the group's message. A lot was similar to the Inner Circle, but one thing was different was that Jericho was the focal point of the group, as the name suggests. And one of the aspects of the Inner Circle that fans enjoyed was the fact that the group members were somewhat treated as equals. Jericho was certainly the lead position, but it wasn't revolving around him per se. Yes, Jericho was higher on the card, and he was the one involved in the main event feuds, but whenever the Inner Circle was together, all members of the group were treated on a parallel level. This wasn't the case in the JAS, with Jericho being the center of attention. This dynamic had its ramifications, which we will get to later, but this allowed younger members of the group like Menard, Parker, and Garcia, who were just starting their careers on AEW and national television, to get a new direction in the company and get the rub from Jericho. Jericho explained the purpose of the JAS, highlighting that its members were all sports entertainers, as boos cascaded down upon them from the fans of All Elite, who were more leaning towards the pro wrestling crowd. Yes, since its inception, AEW had the focus of a pro wrestling group, giving it incredible matches, being bell-to-bell action focus-based. This was a deviation from that. Jericho declared that this group was not pro wrestlers, but sports entertainers, not bound by your limitations, but certainly getting your boos. Now, this group mission purpose of being a sports entertainer over a pro wrestler was the antithesis of another group that was formed around this time with big name talent, the Blackpool Combat Club, all inspired by legit badass pro wrestlers Bryan Danielson, Jon Moxley, Claudio Castagnoli, while managed by William Regal. They were bell-to-bell pro wrestlers for sure. This was going to be a battle of sizzle versus steak, a feud between two groups with two very different ideologies. Eddie Kingston and Santana Ortiz found their allies in the Blackpool Combat Club, and an Anarchy in the Arena match was set for the Double or Nothing pay-per-view. And what a match it was. Yeah, they brought out a gasoline tank in that thing. Before the big match, they were involved in a very entertaining segment on Dynamite, where Jericho verbally obliterated William Regal, Moxley, and Danielson, calling Regal an addict and saying that he has been fired from every company that he has ever worked for in the wrestling industry. Seek it out if you haven't. It's a pretty entertaining segment. Also, Jericho wasn't quite the only one doing the mic work. Matt Menard, who was renamed Daddy Magic, and Angelo Parker, renamed Cool Hand Ange by Jericho, also got a look on the microphone and cooked up a little bit themselves. The booking of JS was strong at first. At Double or Nothing, the Jericho Appreciation Society and the BCC had an over-the-top Anarchy in the Arena match where anything went. They fought all over the place. Music was playing in the background for a big chunk of it. It was something different. It was something special, and it was absolutely violent. The story here about Eddie Kingston wanting to put his hands on Jericho and making the whole match about that built to something with that gasoline tank we mentioned earlier on the former AEW World Champion. And he tried to burn him alive before Bryan Danielson stopped him. Yeah, it was wild. At the end, Jericho Appreciation Society would sleek out, sleazing their way with the win, and Jericho and Hager making Danielson pass out. It marked a strong start for the Jericho Appreciation Society and also breathed new life into Jericho's character within AEW overall, reinventing himself yet again. He started showing a very vicious side, throwing fireballs in people's faces, declaring that he was a wizard. And it was something different from what was going on in AEW. We mentioned that Eddie Kingston was trying to burn Jericho alive during the Anarchy in the Arena match. Well, that's because Jericho threw a fireball in Kingston's face. He was a menace, a fireball-throwing menace. On the June 15th, 2022 episode of AEW Dynamite Road Rager, Jericho had a hair versus hair match with Ortiz, and he managed to win the match following the interference from his Inner Circle teammate Sammy Guevara, who now joined the Jericho Appreciation Society along with his fiancée, Ty Conti. And soon, her friend Anna Jay would soon get into the fold as well. Now the group had 7 members. Yeah, it started to become a pretty big crowd here. In the meantime, Kingston was still hunting for Jericho and revenge. He wanted that revenge, and everyone in his group was challenging him left and right. And then he came back with a barbed wire everywhere deathmatch challenge at Fyter Fest. It was a brutal affair, with both men fighting tooth, nail, and probably flesh from the bone, but in the end, it was Jericho who once again sleazed out another victory after the Jericho Appreciation Society interfered. Considering that it was the last match in the Jericho-Kingston saga, it was sort of an underwhelming finish, but still an entertaining match, bittersweet and bloody. Starting from this point, things started to get repetitive for the Jericho Appreciation Society, with members of the group helping Jericho win his matches. Are you starting to see the formula here? The group peaked during the Anarchy in the Arena match, which was just a few months after they were formed, and after the barbed wire everywhere death match, it seemed to go downhill in the eyes of some. However, Jericho is still doing some of his best and most entertaining work. You can't deny that he doesn't try and reinvent the wheel, and Tony Khan decided to give him the Ring of Honor World Championship in the process. For the first time in his career, Jericho won the ROH Championship from Claudio Castagnoli and had a pretty entertaining run with it. He even had great matches with Danielson and Moxley, and Jericho Appreciation Society revitalized their career a little bit along the way. However, when we look in hindsight, it didn't really help anyone in the long run, maybe just the short run. Yes, members like Garcia, Danny Magic, Cool Hand Ainge got the spotlight, but they never got elevated to the next level. Although Garcia won the ROH Pure Championship and engaged in a competitive feud with Bryan Danielson, the best wrestler in the world, and they had some of the best matches, where Danielson tried to convince him that he was in the wrong group. He's a pro wrestler, not a sports entertainer. It just didn't get past a certain level. Jake Hager was hanging around there as well as a bodyguard muscle, and while Sammy Guevara and his wife Ty Conti showed up whenever they wanted to. Oh yeah, we did mention that Anna Jay was a member of this group, and she didn't have an impact in it much. You can't when there's simply so many members. You can't get the spotlight on everyone and elevate all of those people at the same time. It's kind of a circumstantial challenge. No one benefited in the long run from Jericho himself or maybe Daniel Garcia. Everyone else remained kind of right where they were when they started before. Also, having so many members in the group, as we mentioned, didn't do them any favors. It was getting a bit messy. As soon as Jericho lost the ROH World Championship to Claudio Castagnoli, that was kind of it for JAS. Nothing significant happened within the group following this, and soon the members started drifting apart. Moving into 2023, Jericho started spending less and less time with the group and began interacting with Don Callis, someone he had a long-standing relationship within the wrestling business, showing an interest in aligning himself with Callis and his group, the Don Callis family. It is a different story altogether, but because of Jericho's actions, the Jericho Appreciation Society was not happy, and they confronted him about this on the August 10th, 2023 episode of Dynamite. The highly dissatisfied members stated that their venting frustrations were poured out and walked out on Jericho one by one. They felt like Jericho was not showing the same support and appreciation for them that they had shown for him. And this was kind of the end of the JAS, and it was kind of underwhelming. Fans had already started speculating that this would happen as the members of the group were not really seen together on screen that much around this time. After going their separate ways, that's right, Alexa plays Separate Ways by Journey, the members of the Jericho Appreciation Society have not been able to gain that same level of traction in the eyes of some fans. Jericho himself seemed to be on a random tag team with hook. Sammy Guevara feels kind of directionless and has had issues with injuries in the ring with other performers. It's a whole thing. After he joined and quit the Don Callis family, yeah, there's a lot going on here. Ty Conti and Anna Jay don't get much TV time altogether. Jake Hager seems to have disappeared from AEW altogether. Matt Menard and Angelo Parker have remained together, managing Daniel Garcia. Angelo Parker recently had an interesting angle with Ruby Riott. They're gonna have a child. Congratulations to them. It's evident that the group's dissolution have left them with less direction than they had going into it. The highlight of the group, though, came in their war with the BCC and Eddie Kingston, where you had two opposing factions with two very different ideologies, sports entertainers versus pro wrestlers. But when they kept trying to do this feud over and over again, it kind of had diminishing returns. We didn't mention the blood and guts double cage match, which had a odd, messy finish. The feud also allowed every member of the group on each side to have something because they were on two separate teams, something that AEW has been able to do well, faction warfare, but sometimes it doesn't have the same results when you go back to it over and over again. Part of this happened due to AEW's booking issues, maybe just a stacked roster, maybe just perception becoming reality that maybe, just maybe, this group wasn't everything it was cracked up to be. As the company failed to provide engaging storylines consistently, the group moving forward lost their momentum. Although Jericho Appreciation Society had potential out of the gate to be something special, it unfortunately didn't meet the long-term visions that people intently had for the group when it was launched. It lacked a clear direction past a certain point, having Jericho as the main player. Without compelling missions or goals beyond a certain level, like I said, it just couldn't keep the magic going.